Good evening and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is August 26th, year of our Lord 2025. Got a full show today, got a loaded show. Picks and previews is going to be the name of the game of the day for the show. All going to be college football. Week 1 is here. We had a little appetizer last weekend with week 0. Some good games. Hit the Kansas State game. Did not hit on some of my other games. But either way, had a bit of our appetizer there. Did my preview show last week. Picked the conference championship picks, playoff picks, and my national champion. So if you haven't seen that yet, please go check it out on my page. And let me remind you, if you like this show, please go like and subscribe on Sports Talk on a Budget right here on YouTube if you like the video version. However, if you like the audio version, please go like and subscribe on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find me on places like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I am on all those places, either under my name, Kody Dodier, or under the name Sports Talk on a Budget. You can like and follow me there. But with all that being said, like I said, getting into the show, this is going to be a full picks, previews, college football show. I'm going to break down the top 5 games this weekend in college football. We have a loaded slate. This is a really good week 1 for college football, so a loaded slate, some big rank matchups to start the season that we'll break down as well. And then I'll give you my 3 Kody's covers at the end, just 3 quick picks for games Thursday and Friday night. So 3 Kody's covers at the end. Our new segment, as I started that last week with week 0, Kody's cover will be the way we end the show with picks in college football. When the NFL gets rolling next week, we'll get the NFL in there as well. But this is all going to be college football, like I said. And let's go ahead and dive into our previews and picks because, like I said, huge weekend, week 1. This is going to be a huge weekend. Some great games, great matchups. I want to look at the first one, the biggest matchup of the weekend, at least in my opinion. And that is number 1 Texas at number 3 Ohio State, and Ohio State is currently a 1.5 point favorite in this game. Now, a lot of angles for this game. Of course, Ohio State, your reigning national champion. Texas has been to back-to-back semifinals, both in the playoff with 4, and then last year in the first year in the 12-team playoff. And then a whole lot of newness on both sides. Let's go ahead and start with Ohio State. Ohio State's going to have a new quarterback they named Julian Sayin, the 5-star transfer from Alabama last year. He is going to be their week 1 starting quarterback this week to go up against Texas. New running backs, both Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, went off to the NFL and were drafted in the 2nd round. Emeka Egbuka is gone. Offensive linemen like Josh Simmons and other guys along that offensive line are gone for Ohio State. You move to the defensive side. You're without JT Tulumolia, one of their better players on the defensive side. Your defensive captain and the heartbeat of that team last year, Jack Sawyer, he went off to the NFL. So a lot of people to replace for Ohio State, and not just players. Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, is now the defensive coordinator at Penn State. They also lost their offensive coordinator in Chip Kelly. He went off to the Raiders to the NFL. So they're replacing them with Matt Patricia, the longtime Patriots defensive coordinator under Bill Belichick, will be the new defensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes this weekend this year and this weekend against Texas. And then they decided to elevate their wide receivers coach, Brian Hartline, to the offensive coordinator, a guy who's been recruiting wide receivers like nobody else in the country and coaching them and developing them and putting them in the NFL like nobody else in the country, basically, as well. So a whole lot of new faces and new places for the Ohio State Buckeyes. But here's the thing with Ohio State. Like Alabama, like Georgia, like other programs across the country, the way they recruit top 5 classes basically the last decade, almost every year, top 5 or top 10 classes, they don't rebuild there. They don't have a couple years to rebuild and get back into national contention. They reload. And you can make the argument, and I made this argument last week in the preview episode, that they have the 2 best players in the country. They have the best offensive player in Jeremiah Smith and the best defensive player in Caleb Downs. You can make that argument, and I don't think you get a lot of pushback. So even though they lose a lot of talent to the draft, they reload with guys that are just talented all across the board. So they're still going to be a very good team. I still have them in the playoffs. I still have them contending for a Big Ten title and potentially a national title. So they're going to be a good team. It may be a little bit of sputtering out of the gate because of all those replacements, but when we get to the middle of the season, we will see Ohio State in the top 10 most likely. They'll be around. They'll be a team to reckon with throughout the year as well. Go into Texas. Texas lost a decent amount as well. You lose Quinn Ewers, but I thought Arch Manning probably should have started down the stretch last year and gave them a better chance to win. So not much of a, not any downgrade. I think I actually upgraded at the quarterback position because I think Arch Manning brings a better element. He's a better athlete, and I think he's got a better overall arm as well versus Quinn Ewers. So I think you upgrade there. You lose some wide receivers on the outside, but same with Ohio State. Texas has recruited at a super high level recently, and they're a team that reloads as well. So both these teams are two of the top recruiting programs in the country, two of the top coaching staffs in the country with Ryan Day and Steve Sarkisian for Texas. So this is a huge game. This is a game that a lot of people thought may have been the national championship game last year and ended up being the national semifinal. Ohio State beat Texas. Was a good game. Jack Sawyer gets that pick six late and kind of puts it on ice for Ohio State. But either way, it was a really good game. And you know what Texas was able to do last year in the bowl game or in the playoff game? They were able to shut down Jeremiah Smith. Jeremiah Smith had one reception last year. I want to say it was for like 10 yards or something like that. But one reception in the game last year against Ohio State. That is going to be a huge test for them as well. You got Jeremiah Smith. Carnell Tate's a good player. Brendan Innes is a good player. But Jeremiah Smith is going to be the guy that they run their offense through for Ohio State. So if they can make the other guys beat them, which Ohio State was able to do last year, but can they do that in week one? That's going to be huge for Texas if they can do that again. And then Texas, what does your offense now? What does your offense look like now that Arch Manning is the unquestioned starting quarterback, not just for a few games? He is your guy going forward. Is there more movement in the pocket because he's a better athlete? Are you going to use him in the run game as well because he has good legs and is good in the run game? That is a huge question mark for me as well. What I'm not worried about is the defenses for both these teams. I think the defense will be pretty good for both these teams, if not really good. Great five-star recruits all over the field. Little question mark with Matt Patricia there. He has not done well coaching defense when he's not under Bill Belichick's tutelage. So that is a question mark there. He was not good in Detroit when he was the head coach running the defense. He was not good in Philadelphia when he was the defensive coordinator. He's been to a couple of places along the way, and he has not been good without Bill Belichick. So that is a question mark there. But he's got such supreme talent with Ohio State and that roster, it shouldn't be a major issue. On the other side with Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator for Texas, he's humming. They're humming on defense. I don't think they're going to have any problem here. This game, I think, is going to be one of the better games of the weekend, not just in the matchup because it's 1 versus 3, but I think overall, once it's said and done, it's going to be one of the better games of the weekend. Big noon kickoff. I know they don't love that there in Columbus, but you got Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt on the call, so you know it's a big game when those guys are there. Looking at this game, I actually like Texas in this game. So I'm going to go ahead and roll with Texas plus 1.5 to cover, and I think they go into Columbus and get a victory because I think if you're going to play Ohio State this year, you want to play them early, and that is exactly what Texas is doing. This Ohio State team will have it going. Julian Sand will have it going, and that offense will have it going somewhere throughout the season, and you do not want to mess with them or play them then. But week one, I think, is okay. Is a good time to play them. I think Texas is going to be more prepared for week one because Arch has been there in the program and has kind of been the guy waiting in the wings for the last couple of years. So he's been there and he's ready. And I just think Texas is a more well-rounded team heading into week one. If this game was played middle of the season or in the end of the season, I might take Ohio State. But go ahead and give me Texas to cover plus 1.5, and I think they win the game outright. So even money line spread there would be a decent bet as well. Let's go ahead and move to another game. This is going to be an SEC-ACC matchup, and this is going to be number 8 Alabama versus Florida State, and this is in Florida State, and Alabama's currently a 13.5-point favorite. Now, the big question mark is, does Florida State bounce back from just an abysmal season last year? They were 2-10. One of their wins was against an FCS team, and their other win was against Cal, when Cal had to travel basically as far as you can travel domestically outside of going to Alaska, Hawaii, basically. So they were a terrible team last year. And they made a ton of changes in the offseason. They bring Gus Malzahn, who was the head coach at UCF, former head coach at Auburn. He is now their offensive coordinator. They bring in Tony White, who was the defensive coordinator at Nebraska, also was the defensive coordinator at one point for Syracuse, I believe. He's a really good defensive coordinator. He is now the Florida State defensive coordinator. You bring in Castellanos, the quarterback from Boston College, who beat Florida State last year in that second game of the season. He is now your quarterback for Florida State. They brought in a ton of guys from the transfer portal, which they've tended to do under Mike Norvell recently. It worked out great 2 years ago. They went undefeated and should have been in the playoff, but weren't, but went undefeated and won an ACC championship game. It blew up in their face massively last year where they went, like I said, again, 2-10. So the question mark for me in this game is Florida State. Is Florida State competitive in this game? Because I don't see them winning. Yes, I'm giving up my pick already. I don't see them winning this game, but are they competitive and can they cover? Because if they're not competitive and they don't cover at home against an Alabama team, who I think is going to be a really good team this season, and as you saw last week in my preview episode, I think they're going to win the SEC and contend for a national championship. If Florida State could be competitive in this game, I think it's a real building block for the season. And obviously, if they can find somehow how to fucking pull off the win, then it's a huge building block for this team going the rest of the season. Don't see that happening, but if Florida State can compete in this game and keep it close and cover, I think that's a win in their book. I know they're not going to take any moral victories, and there's no more moral victories in college football, but I think that would be a big moral victory. Looking at the other side for Alabama. Alabama is just like the two teams we talked previously in Ohio State and Texas. They have an offensive, defensive personnel littered with 4- and 5-star players, so they're going to have talent all over the field. Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise that he's not a good coach. He's a very good coach. He knows how to run the offense. Ryan Grubb, his offensive coordinator, who's been basically with him at every stop outside of last year when he went to Seattle and had a cup of coffee there, he's back. He's running the offense, so now Kalen DeBoer is comfortable with his guy running the offense and running the quarterbacks as well. They named Ty Simpson, a former 5-star player as well in his own right, as their starting quarterback a few weeks ago. I think they're going to run the ball really well. I think they're going to play really good defense. I like the personnel on the offensive line and the defensive line for Alabama. Both sides of the lines of scrimmage, I think it'd be really good for Alabama. Like I said, if Florida State can keep this close, I think that's a moral victory for them, and that's a win. I don't think they do. I think Alabama goes into Doe Campbell Stadium in Tallahassee, Florida, and pushes Florida State around for 4 quarters. So I think Alabama wins this game. I think Alabama covers. So give me Alabama minus 13.5 to win and cover in Tallahassee and get a massive win to start the season. And then the questions are going to be swirling again for Mike Norvell and Florida State. Is he the right coach there, and what is going on down there? Because it could be a long season if it's anywhere near last year. And then the third game I'm going to break down is another SEC ACC matchup, and that is going to be in Death Valley, not in Baton Rouge, but Death Valley in Clemson, South Carolina. And that is number 9 LSU at number 4 Clemson. And Clemson is currently a 4-point favorite in this game. I've been back and forth all day with this game. This game, I think, obviously, 2 Tigers, 2 teams that like to call their stadiums Death Valley, 2 quarterbacks that I'm a huge fan of, and Garrett Nussmeier for LSU and Cade Klubnik for Clemson. 2 coaches that I like Dabo Swinney a lot. I'm a little bit on the fence with Brian Kelly. I like the defensive coordinators. Clemson brings in Tom Allen, who was the head coach in Indiana a few years ago and the defensive coordinator last year for Penn State. He is now their defensive coordinator. Blake Baker is in his second year as the defensive coordinator at LSU, and he did a really good job turning around that defense last year for LSU, so I like the direction that LSU is heading. But these 2 teams couldn't be further – they couldn't be more different as far as philosophies. This LSU team went in the portal this offseason and went big game hunting. They got good players on the offensive side, good players on the defensive side, but loaded up in the portal. Where Clemson, Dabo Swinney just got his first 2 portal players. I think he had a wide receiver and maybe a DB or maybe 2 wide receivers in the portal this year. In his entire time at Clemson, those are his first 2 transfer portal players this past offseason. So the philosophies and how they build their rosters are totally different. Clemson likes to do it through the high school ranks, old school that way, which I believe is more sustainable, but can take more time to develop. Where LSU does well in high school, but does also hit the portal big time. That can work, but we've seen it work for teams, and we've seen it blow up in teams' faces. Like I said with Florida State, it worked for them 1 year, great, worked terribly for them the next year. So question marks there. Question marks also along the offensive line for LSU. You lose Will Campbell, your starting left tackle. He's off to the NFL. You lose your right tackle as well. So can you replace those guys along the offensive line? And that's going to be tested right away in week 1 because Clemson is stout along the offensive line as well. So big question mark there. Can LSU block against this Clemson defensive line? If they can, it's going to be a long night for Garrett Nussmeier and that running game for LSU. So that is a big question mark there. And then LSU secondary. LSU is basically known for their secondary play throughout history of that program. You could just go and name a ton of guys, Honey Badger, Ryan Clark, a ton of guys that have, Patrick Peterson, that have come through LSU and have been studs in the secondary. They're going to have their hands full against a three-headed monster for Clemson in that receiver room. Clemson's finally got their receivers back. Remember the day of Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, T. Higgins. They used to kind of put out wide receivers like it was LSU, Ohio State, or USC. That has not been the case for Clemson recently, but they have three guys that I believe will be playing on an NFL roster in the next 2 to 3 years, and three guys that Cade Klubnik can rely on. So that is huge, and a huge matchup there. You have the strength of LSU in that secondary and the strength of the offense for Clemson with those wide receivers, with Cade Klubnik slinging the rock to them. So a lot of keys here for both these teams. For me, LSU has not won a week one opening season game since 2019. And we remember that 2019 team. That was the Burrow, Chase, Jefferson team that was unbeatable. One of the best teams I've ever seen in my life, basically. That's the last time this LSU program has won their week one game. They lost their opener last year to USC. And then the 2 previous years, they lost to Florida State in back-to-back seasons in the opener. What I will commend LSU is they schedule tough for week one, and they're not afraid to schedule tough for week one. But what can happen, obviously, when you do that is you can lose those week one games, which they have. Can they right the ship? Those were all neutral site games in the past. This is a road game. This is in Clemson, one of the toughest places to play in the country, a really tough environment. Can they go in there and can they play a tough game and walk out with the victory? I don't think they do. I do think they cover, however, so I am going to take LSU +4. Give me Clemson to win this game. I think both these teams will contend for a national title and get to the playoff later in the season. Clemson just too much in week one, the home field advantage. The team has more continuity because they've played together longer, where it's a lot of transfers for LSU. I think this LSU team will be really good about halfway through the season. They're going to be really, really good team, like Ohio State, who I talked about in the opening. But I don't think they're good enough to go into the Clemson and get a victory. But I do think they keep it close and cover. So give me LSU +4 to cover. Clemson wins the game outright, so no LSU money line play there. And then our next matchup is going to be in, so this is going to be in the ACC, and then Notre Dame, who's basically like a pseudo ACC team, but they're also independent. They don't really know what they want to be lately, but we have number 6 Notre Dame at Miami, and Notre Dame is currently a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Now, Notre Dame, it took them a while to name their quarterback, but they named C.J. Carr their starting quarterback, I believe, at the end of last week, and then it looks like Carson Beck, all indications all offseason, all fall camp is that he's ready to go. He is going to be the week 1 starter for Miami. We're going to start on the Miami side. So like I said, number 6, Notre Dame, at number 10, Miami. Notre Dame, a 2.5-point favorite. We'll start on the Miami side. Miami last year basically looked like a Lincoln Riley team, where it was led by their quarterback and their defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. And Cam Ward had to play hero ball every single game, put up 40-plus points, and sometimes that wasn't even enough. That was Miami team last year. Their defense was no good. They get rid of their defensive coordinator. They hired the defensive coordinator from Minnesota. I think they upgraded there. Are they better on the defensive side? Are they better on the defensive side? That's a huge question mark, because I think Carson Beck, now I don't think he's Cam Ward in any sense of the imagination there, but I think he's a solid quarterback. They have solid weapons on the wide receiver. They've recruited really well recently under Mario Cristobal in high school and in the portal, so they have plenty of talent, plenty of 4 and 5 stars along that roster on both sides of football, especially on the offensive side. So I think their offense will be fine. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I think their offensive line will be able to block well, and they'll be able to throw the ball in this game. The question mark for me is, what is this Miami defense going to look like? Because they're going up against one of the best players in the country, and in my opinion, the best running back in the country in Jeremiah Love, the running back for Notre Dame. That is the key there. Can Miami slow down Jeremiah Love? Because if that's not the case, Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman have no problem with slowing down the football game and just running the ball down your throat. They have zero problem doing that. They will do that all night long. They have no problem doing that at all. So if Miami cannot slow down the run game in Jeremiah Love, and C.J. Carr can actually do some things with his legs as well, it's going to be a long night for this Miami team. So that is a huge question mark for me. On the Notre Dame side, this is their 3rd straight year with a new quarterback, or actually their 4th straight year with a new quarterback. It was Riley Leonard, Sam Hartman, and then I'm blanking on the guy who was the year before. But either way, 4 straight year with a new quarterback. That doesn't seem to be the issue for Notre Dame. And This Notre Dame team really doesn't rely on their quarterback and ask their quarterback to do a ton. They rely on the running game and they rely on defense. And I believe that's going to be the identity for this team this year. Like I said, best running back in the country, in my opinion. I think a guy who was in my top 5 Heisman contenders going in the country, and Jeremiah Love, he is going to be their bell cow. He is going to be their offense. So that is going to be the key there for Notre Dame and for Miami to stop them. But can they get anything out of the quarterback position? What does CJ Carr look like? Can he make some plays with his arm? Can he make some plays with his legs as well? Because that was huge with Riley Leonard last year. Riley Leonard was a threat in the run game for Notre Dame every week as well. So that is a big question mark for me. Notre Dame, I just think they're a more well-rounded program at this juncture versus Miami. Miami, the question marks on defense for me are just too big right now. So I think Notre Dame goes into Miami. I think there's going to be a ton of Notre Dame fans in Miami for this game. So it's still going to be a home game for Miami, of course, but I think it's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans. So I don't think it's going to be much of a home field advantage for Miami. Like I said, I think Notre Dame's they're further along as a program. I think they're a better overall program right now than Miami. And I like their direction just a little bit more than Miami, even though I have both these teams making the playoff later in the year. So I think Notre Dame goes into Miami, not only wins, but covers. So give me Notre Dame minus 2.5 in this game to go down to Miami, get a huge victory to start the season, and get back on track after they made the national championship game last year. Final breakdown we have, this is going to be a Big 12 ACC matchup, and this is going to be the Monday night game. So the Notre Dame-Miami game is actually a Sunday night game. The Monday night game is TCU at North Carolina, and TCU is a 3-point favorite, and this is Bill Belichick's debut. So that's going to be the storyline of this game. Bill Belichick, his debut. What can we expect from them? A ton of transfers. I think it was 40-plus transfers that they brought in. So that's all. Like I said, that's always kind of boom or bust. You either live by the transfer portal or you die by the transfer portal. And with that kind of volume, we've really only seen that with 3 programs. We saw that with Deion Sanders in Colorado when he brought in 70-plus transfers 2 years ago. Did not work. They ended up 4-8. We've seen that a couple of times with Florida State. They worked one year. They went 13-0. It didn't work last year. They were 2-10. We've seen it a couple of times with Lincoln Riley and USC. It worked one year when they went 11-3 and Caleb Williams won the Heisman Trophy. It did not work the year after when they went 8-5 or something like that and had a disappointing season and lost 4 out of the last 5 games on the stretch. So, like I said, you live by the portal, you die by the portal. And then just looking at North Carolina with Bill Belichick, watching an interview with Joel Klatt and Tom Brady a couple weeks ago, Tom Brady kind of pointed it out perfectly to me. What kind of expectations is Bill Belichick going to have for his players? Because he always expected almost perfection from each one of his players in the NFL level. He doesn't have NFL players. He has 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-old kids. These kids have not been playing football for nearly as long as the guys he's used to coaching. What kind of expectations and what kind of load is he going to put on these players? Or is he going to get off the reins a little bit? Hey, these are college kids. I can't inundate them with all the things I would do with my professional teams in New England. What is going to be that philosophy there? Huge question mark for me. His son, Steve Belichick, is going to be running the defense. Did a pretty darn good job last year, underrated job for Washington last year. So that I don't think is going to be an issue. The offense, I think, is going to be the bigger question mark for me. What is this offense going to look like with North Carolina? They brought in transfer quarterbacks. They brought in transfer wide receivers, transfers on the offensive line. Can they mesh in week 1? On the other side, you have TCU. Sonny Dykes, I believe, is in his 4th or 5th season with TCU. Obviously, he took them to the national championship game 3 years ago. Okay season last year after a disappointing season 2 years ago. Not a lot of transfer portal play for TCU. They like to build through the high school ranks a little bit more. They recruit kind of on an average level, anywhere from like the 30s to 50s. So their team isn't going to be built like the teams we've talked about before, whether I was LSU and Clemson, Notre Dame, Miami, Texas, Ohio State, Bama. They're not going to have that kind of loaded roster, but they're going to have continuity and they're going to know what they want to do on a week-to-week basis. And I believe this program knows what they want to do week 1. I have no fucking idea what North Carolina and Bill Belichick are going to look like week 1. So that is a huge question mark for me. I think TCU goes into North Carolina, gets a huge victory on Monday night, and covers as well. So give me TCU -3 to go in, get a victory against Bill Belichick in his debut, spoil it a little bit. I think Bill Belichick in North Carolina could be better off later in the season, and they have a really easy schedule, so they still could get to 8-9 wins on the season. But week one, I don't think this is a good matchup for them right off the bat, playing a team coached by Sonny Dykes, who's got to be ready to go and played in a lot of these big games in the past. So give me TCU to win and cover. TCU -3 is a play for me there. And then finally, I'm going to give you my 3 quick Kody's Covers. So this is a segment brought to you by me, Kody's Covers. Don't have a sponsor for this yet, but this is Kody's Covers. These are Thursday and Friday night games. I'm going to start with a Thursday night game, and that is going to be number 25 Boise State at South Florida. And South Florida is currently a 6.5-point underdog, so Boise State's a 6.5-point favorite in this game. So the game's in South Florida, so that's a long travel and a different environment for Boise State. South Florida actually had a sneaky good year last year. They went 7-6, and they have a top 15 returning production roster. So what that means last year, what that means is they have, out of all teams in the country, all 134 teams, they're in the top 15 for the most returning players on their roster. I think that bodes well for South Florida. I really like their quarterback. I think he can beat you with his legs and is underrated with his arm. Looking at Boise State, how do you replace your do-everything running back in Ashton Genty? Maddox Matson is going into his second year as the starting quarterback, so that's going to go a long way. So interesting game here. I think Boise State goes into South Florida and gets a victory. I think South Florida keeps it close and covers, so give me South Florida +6.5 in this game. Then we have an SEC Big 12 matchup. This is Auburn at Baylor, and Auburn is a 2.5-point favorite, and this is a Friday night game on Fox. I like Baylor in this game. Sawyer Robertson's returning as their quarterback. I think he's a better quarterback than Jackson Arnold, who is the transfer from Oklahoma, who hasn't shown me anything, even though he was a 5-star quarterback coming out of high school. I don't like the direction of this program under Hugh Freeze for Auburn, so I think Baylor wins at home, and if they win, they're going to cover because they're actually an underdog, so give me Baylor +2.5 in this game. And then finally, another Friday night game, and that is Georgia Tech at Colorado, and Georgia Tech is currently a 5-point favorite. Georgia Tech's one of my sleeper teams in the entire country this year. I have them playing in the ACC championship game and losing to Clemson. I really like their direction of their team under Brent Key. I really like Haynes King and what he's been able to do. He's played a lot of college football. I think they go into Colorado. Colorado just named Caden Salter, the transfer from Liberty, quarterback. Their starting quarterback today, so that took a little bit of a minute there. I think, and they lose their 2 best players by far, in Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And then the whole Deion situation, he had the illness and the sickness a lot during the offseason. So how involved was he throughout the season? I think this Colorado team is going to fall back to what they were before. Maybe not as bad, but not as good as they were last year. And I think this Georgia Tech team is going to turn some heads and make some noise this year. So give me Georgia Tech to go into Colorado to win and cover. Georgia Tech -5 is the play there for me in the last pick of Kody's Covers. This has been Sports Talk on a Budget. If you like the video version, please like and subscribe right down here on Sports Talk on a Budget on YouTube. However, if you like the audio version, please go like and subscribe on places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcast. Go follow me on social media. You can find me on all the social medias, either under my name, Kody Dodier, or under Sports Talk on a Budget. Thank you again for watching and listening. We're here. It's week 1 college football. We fucking made it. Thank you again, like I said, for watching and listening, and have a great night.